Hello, my name is Dr. Philo K.P.H. I'm a full professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies, University of Alberta. We are so delighted to know about you and to tell you a little bit more about our department, as well as to also answer any questions you may have. It's a little bit of a pity that we cannot meet as we usually do. We meet out there on the field, talk to each other. We hope those times will come, but for now, we will do our very best to answer your questions. But before we get to the questions, let me tell you a little bit more about women's and gender studies. I know you might ask, what in the world is women and gender studies? I never studied that in high school. Some of you may have heard about this class, about this department. It's exciting. You may not have heard much about it because it's also a fairly new department that started, I would say, in the late 1960s and into the 1970s. Women and Gender Studies looks at what we call the intersectionalities of gender. We look at issues that have to do with how individuals as men, women relate in all their various intersections, gender, race, class, etc. Look at the Women and Gender Studies department more in terms of all departments put in one. We actually stand at the intersections of virtually every department. If you are in our department, you actually have the opportunity to take a peek into other departments. Women and Gender Studies, if you go to our website, you will see something like this. I will, let me just see if I can find that website. Doesn't look like it's showing, but that's okay. I'll get back to Zoom. But if you are here, if you go to our department, you will find a number of things. First of all, you will find our courses. We have very exciting courses. We have courses like Women and War. We have Feminism and Sexualities. We do courses on Indigenous women. We have critical issues. We have feminist research methodologies. We do research on various parts of the world, such as gender and social justice in contemporary Africa. We do research on Canadian issues in particular, Canadian feminism activisms, race, gender, and class, etc. You ask yourself, where would all of this lead me? The wonderful thing about being in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies is that you really get to understand yourself better as man, woman, female, as somebody who is gay, lesbian, however you define yourself, trans. It is a department where you position yourself where to actually look at yourself and the world. You get to learn more about yourself in relation to the world. You get to learn about various cultures, different parts of the world. You are also provided the opportunity to critique these areas. You are supposed to critique the taken for granted knowledge you already have about people around the world. This department opens your eyes actually to some of the intricacies about our world that you never ever considered. Most importantly, you will ask, what will this take me? You know what? Our students, when they graduate from their first degree, you find them in various areas. They are in social work, they are in medicine. Yes, they are in medicine. They are in theater arts. You will find them in the performing arts. You find them in law. When you finish in terms of doing your master's, there are so many. You can go from any department in the Faculty of Arts. You can move into even other departments. You can go into public health. There are so many things you can do with our courses when you graduate. And you know the wonderful thing, we also have what we call cross-listed courses. You can actually, in the Department of Women's Studies, while you are there, you can take courses that are related to women and gender studies in other departments, which means that if you are in anthropology, political science, religion, history, there are courses that you can take that are cross-listed to our courses so that if you take them, You get credit, you be credited to you as, for instance, a history student, but it was also reflected in us the fact that this is a women and gender studies course. Just in case you want to come into the department, or you would want in the future for this to be attributed to you as, I have experience, I have taken courses in women and gender studies, even while you're in history. We have courses like anthropology of gender, reading gender and sexuality in English, indigenous women's media in native studies. We have women in Latin America. We have the politics of gender in political science. You know, if you are in women and gender studies, it is really like being positioned to be in every department, to learn so much about what people teach and what people study in other parts, in other departments, and then to come back, get your degree, and have the opportunity to go to any of those departments, or to even prepare yourself for a profession in medicine, a profession in law, etc. We have interesting and exciting scholars who teach in women and gender studies. What brings us together is that we are interested in issues of gender and its intersectionalities like race, class, religion, language, etc. We have wonderful scholars, exciting scholars. We have Professor Liz Gotel. She does a lot of work on feminism and law. Her work is used even by the law courts. She is quoted in various magazines like the Economist. We have Dr. Susan Luhmann. Dr. Luhmann actually, along with other professors, founded what we call Intersections of Gender. This is an effort to actually bring scholarship and other kinds of initiatives that have to do with women's and gender studies across the entire university. So in her position as former director, she will actually help to bring those, to encourage people who do research on women and gender studies. And you find them from medicine to music. They're all over the place. What about myself? I am a professor of Africa. I do research on Africa, issues of gender in Africa, as well as issues of gender among African immigrants in North America, particularly Canada. A lot of my research is either in Africa or here. And believe me, women and gender studies is an exciting place to be. You know, I've talked too much. I think I'll just wait now to look at your questions. I am very, very excited to answer your questions. So I'll stop now to go to your questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joanna Mancher. I just joined the panelist as the Student Engagement and Communications Specialist. And what I'll do is I'll help monitor the Q&A panel, and I will ask the questions, and Phil, you can just answer them. Yeah, so the first question that we've got this morning is, why did you choose to teach women's and gender studies?
Wonderful question. This is such an exciting question, and thank you so much for asking this. You know what? I actually, I did my master's in econometrics, which is quantitative analysis in economics, and much of my life at that time was spent mathematically, and as you know, econometrics is a mixture of mathematics and statistics. I was trying to measure Africa's, and particularly African countries' national debt, until I came in to do my master's in economics, and I came into, that's how I was introduced to women's studies. While I was trying to measure national debt, I took courses and I began to understand things about how men and women relate, how there are various kinds of genders, how it impacts on our everyday life. I began to look into my own life, how these kinds of relationships, where I was born, how I was raised, relationship in my family, in my community, as an African, as a Black woman, how it really this relationship shaped my life. I couldn't hold my interest. I really needed to explore who I am. I wanted to explore how did my life emerge. And I began to also look at people like me. And I found that there were patterns. Those of us who grew up, for instance, in the developing world, the kinds of relationships we had, anywhere from your childhood, going to school, marriage, children, it became clear to me that these are more important to me. I wanted to understand, for instance, why is it that how my brothers are treated are slightly different from how I was treated? Why are my options in society different from the options of the men I meet? How come I'm regarded this way and men are regarded in a different way? Of course, it got more complicated because I began to realize that there are other intersectionalities even within gender. But I began to study. And as I did this, I became more excited. In fact, my PhD, instead of looking at national debt, I actually began to look into women who are professional women in Africa. How do they negotiate power with their husbands and their communities as professional women who, on the average, tend to be seen as subordinate to their husbands? It was very exciting. I began to actually realize that there are many ways in which these women exert power and influence, even within their marriage. And there are many ways in which they face barriers and how they figure out these barriers. And at that time I was single, and it was really important to me that I know where I was going, even if I decide to marry and have children. So what I will say is that women and gender studies began to shape my lives. You know, there's nothing as wonderful as looking at what you have, studying the world from your own perspective, doing something that is a scholarship but is related to you. I hope I've answered your question. It's exciting to do what is your life.
Thanks, Phil. That was a great answer. So we've got another question in the chat. So I am going to encourage the attendees that are listening, you know, if something that you hear right now sparks your attention and helps you think of another question to ask, please do answer it. This is definitely the time to ask your question. And, you know, if you're thinking of it, there are other people thinking of the same question too. So the next question, Phil, that I'm going to get you to answer is, how is women and gender studies related to economics? And if you can explain the connection between WGS and econ. So how does that relate, whether a student, you know, could students do a double major and how would that work? Or if somebody's choosing, you know, econ as their major, would making women's and gender studies their minor make sense? You know, can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Wonderful, wonderful question. Yes, we do have, you can have a major in women's studies, you can major in women's studies and have a minor somewhere, you can major in economics and minor in women and gender studies. You can also do a double major in women and gender studies and economics. All of this is really, you know, what you choose to do. But you say, how is women and gender studies related to economics? Well, okay, what is economics? Well, it is really a science of how we handle not just finances, but the various ways in which our, you know, the economy, and I mean economy out there, influences our lives. You know, the economy could be a family economy, in which case you are looking at how do we deal with our income as couples or as parents or as the whole family? How do we manage our budget? Who brings what into the family? Who has more bargaining power than the others? Well, some people look at research, actually look at the economy of the family. Because within the family, you do know that these people, when people live within the family, at least for those people who made that family, at least the adults, these are people who are strangers. They come together to form a family and they begin to move. You realize that they don't always have common interests. Even with their children, whoever they are as members of that family, there are common interests, but there are also interests that are divergent. So looking at the economy of the family, the various actors, the powers they have, their bargaining powers, and how all the relationships that go towards having a coherent family, go towards the well-being of the family, is a study of its own. Because you do know, let's say for instance, if a woman is in a family or whoever is a member there and they don't have that economic power, guess what happens when, some women, for instance, stay in the family because they may even suffer violence. Why do they stay? Sometimes it's because the economics is not there. They don't have that financial bargaining power. There could be other factors, but that's a major factor. You can also look at the economy in terms of the society in which you live, like Canada. Part of that economy, looking at women and gender studies in economics is asking, who gets maternity leave, who has unemployment insurance, how much am I paid at the U of A, vis-a-vis the men that I work with. If I come into the U of A at the same time with a man, how much, why would the person earn more than me or me earn more than the person? You begin to see patterns. On the average, you will find that various groups of people, for instance, men tend to earn higher than women of the same qualification who came at the same time. You will find that there are differences in terms of remuneration, in terms of race. You will find on the average, there are patterns. Black people are likely to earn less on the average. Indigenous people are likely to earn less on the average. If you look at people various in terms of class, race, religion, etc., these are all the various ways in which our lives may be affected by economics. You can look at it in a broader perspective in terms of if you get into Canada, the Canada as a society. Anywhere from employment insurance to child benefits have a bearing on men, women, and the various intersections of gender within them. You can even go beyond Canada. Some people will study global economics. If you look at global economies, the world is divided into two. The so-called advanced industrial countries and those who are in the developing world. Why do we call them developing? That's the kind of question you can explore. The lives of people there and the lives of people over here are not the same. You don't take it for granted that that's just how it is. That is where you begin to get into history, colonization. Some of these people were colonized. They're even further back into history, slavery. So there's a very, very close connection between economics, women and gender studies. I can go on, but definitely if you want to make one your major, the other one your minor, or you want to take a double major, I can tell you that it will be a very, very exciting venture you're going into. And I can think of what you can do when you come out. You may have an occupation in anywhere from banking, law, to social work or psychology. So definitely there's a lot of room there to explore the world and also to form an occupation or to pursue a profession.
Phil, we've got another question in the Q&A that came up. And you've touched on this a little bit already, but the question is, how did women's and gender studies help you to reflect on yourself and the society that we live in today? So yeah, if maybe you just want to give a quick recap on that and then maybe expand on, why it would be important for any art student to take a women and gender studies course.
First of all, you need to understand yourself and you need to place yourself in the context of today's society. For me, for instance, as I started my journey, I was brought up in the middle of an African village. To me, I just took the world for granted. Yeah, I was brought up there and somehow I found myself in Canada. When I started to study women and gender studies, I realized that I just didn't end up in Canada. I was socialized to believe some things about myself and about the society I grew up in and about Canada. Today I look at that society differently. I don't look at my society, I am from Nigeria. I don't look at it as I'm simply from Nigeria. Women and gender studies has made it to realize that I am from a colonized culture. My country was colonized. Some of my behavior is not simply because of my culture, it is because it's a culture of the oppressed. I have been oppressed. Some of the opportunities I didn't have was not because my parents didn't work hard. It is coming from a culture that was colonized. We are not poor simply because we're poor. No, we didn't have opportunities that other people do have. When I look at myself in Canada today, I don't look at myself as simply a professor working at the U of A. No, I know that I'm not just a professor. I am Black, I am African, I'm a woman. Some of these things are things that do shape my life positively and negatively. And you know that we are now in the era of Black Lives Matter. This is a very exciting time to be in women and gender studies because in our life there is now an increasing awakening across the world that the world is divided into two. Not just before we used to think is it developed, just the developed and the advanced industrial countries. But there is another great divide that is even more important. Whites and non-whites. And it has an impact. And anybody who has done some reflections after the death of George Floyd know that we can't continue to live in that world just the way it is. We must begin to look at what are some of those forces and the barriers that make non-white people not achieve as much as white people. What are the factors that create barriers in their lives? And we know also that it's not just race. There is class, there is gender, and all its intersections that impact on people's lives. As a women and gender studies professor, I don't live my life just like any other person. I live with that consciousness. And every day I wake up, I ask myself, what can I do to make the world better? I do hope that when students come into women and gender studies, when they leave, one thing they live with, people go to get jobs, establish themselves in society, but one critical thing that our students live with is a consciousness about inequalities in society. And that consciousness of, I need to make a difference. It's not a burden. It's an exciting thing to know that I've been given this knowledge to make a difference. And believe me, our students make a difference across the world because they write us and they tell us where they are. And when they write to us about what they are doing, they are excited about what they're doing.
Great, Phil. We've got another really cool question that came in. So the question is, if I am minoring in women's and gender studies, I'm curious about what type of assignments will be given in first year classes. So can you maybe talk about the 100 level courses in WGS and what students can expect, especially now that, you know, things are online and we're doing everything virtually this time around?
Thank you. That's a very, very important question that I have not addressed. And thank you so much for bringing up this question. See, we have two very exciting questions. Classes. We call them entry points. This appear to be the entry points through which students come into women and gender studies. We have WGS 101. WGS 102. WGS 101 is really to basically introduce you to women and gender studies. It talks about gender representations. It's really to bring your consciousness to how our world is gendered. Gendered not simply men, women, but gendered in terms of race, class, religion, language, in so various ways. So you will see representations of women as well as representations of men in their various intersections. Trans, lesbian, gay, straight, all of that. We are going to introduce you, and not simply that you see those representations, you begin to recognize them. Everywhere you go after you take that class, you see gender representations all around you, things that you never noticed before. But also, it shows you to some extent, in a very basic way, how those gendered representations are not by accident. Because when we show you those gendered representations, we also make you see how in our world, there are various factors, various forces that come together to shape those representations. You begin to remove your assumptions that they just are there by accident. We show you the representations, we show you how they are formed. They are formed by society. And sometimes we actually help society in forming them. We also, most importantly, show you how they feature in your life, as well as the lives of people around you, how they shape their well-being, how they shape their growth, how they shape their relationships as family members, as members of society, as students, etc. That class is exciting because that is when students come in, their eyes are opened. What kind of assignments will you have in classes like that? Now, we used to have it face-to-face, now it's online. What it means is that after this, you can actually go look for yourself because it's already online. You can open it and see it. And this is a link that we're going to leave eventually so that when people can click, they can see those courses. Because when you go, you will get assignments that enable you. First of all, we want our students to think and articulate their thoughts. So there's a lot of discussion. You'll be surprised at what happens to you when someone tells you, what do you think? Which is what a lot of students, especially from high school, may not get, the kind of questions you don't get. What do you think about? So you think, And among the people you're having your discussion, 2 or 3 students, 4, 5, 6, you articulate your thoughts. Yes, we can do that on Zoom. We make you write. One of the wonderful things that we give to our students is that they start very early to learn how to write. So many of our students, even as undergraduates, they work with us because many of us have research programs. We do various kinds of research, and because our work is intersectional, which means it intersects with other departments and other faculties, you end up learning how to do research. We get our students to start early. For instance, all through the summer, I have some undergraduates working for me. I collaborate with people anywhere from music, public health, nursing, and various places in the Faculty of Arts. So I get my research assistants from all over. We actually get our students to think. So you will be given to write. You will ask to make observations and respond. You'll be given papers to read and say something about them. Don't be scared, they are very, very basic. In women and in WGS 102, which is the one that happens after the summer, fall session, 102 is in the winter, and what do you do there? Something similar, except that in this case, we focus more on issues of social justice. So we call it gender and social justice. It's just a slant, but it becomes a little bit more focused. And again, it's about the same thing. We have discussions, we respond to papers and films, various kinds of material. Sometimes we bring guests to come and speak, depending on the kinds of expertise that they have. We make you to write. We encourage you to write, to speak, and express yourself. Because women and gender studies is about reflection about you in relation to the world. We get you started really early because that is also what research is all about. As I said, our students get started very early on working with professors on research projects. And what is the advantage of doing that? Many of our students, by the time they are doing their master's degree, they are paid by professors to do their work, to help professors work. They're called research assistants. We don't get them to be research assistants free. We pay them. Imagine doing what you love to do and being paid for it. Exciting.
That is really exciting, Phil. Okay, so I'm going to encourage the attendees. We are going to end this in just over 10 minutes. So I've got a couple more questions that have come in. And if anybody has questions that they've been considering asking, now is the time to type that in. So Phil, we've got 2 more questions. So one specifically about the class, Women and Food or Feminism and Food. What do those classes specifically get into? And then there's one more question that I think is actually kind of, it's getting beyond sort of some really basics. So answer that question and then I'll get to the next one here. So what does the class Women in Food or Feminism and Food talk about?
Again, that's a very interesting class, and this person probably have really, picked into our website because this is one of our most popular courses, if not the most popular course. Dr. Chloe Taylor does a wonderful job of teaching this class, and we keep raising the bar because there is just a lot of students want to get in. You know that as gendered human beings, especially those gendered female, by society, we have a very thorny relationship with food. Food is supposed to be a nutrient, it's supposed to nurture us. We're supposed to, but you do know that when it comes to how we look, how we carry ourselves, how the world sees us, sometimes we're not happy about who we are. Not feeling comfortable about who you are is not really about who you are, it's about who the world says you are. So this is a class where you come in to explore those things. Who am I? What is my relationship with food? How does the world around me and what the world expects of women shape that relationship? It's very exciting. Even people have heard about people who have anorexia and all of that. We look at it not simply in terms of just that, but really in a broader perspective. How does how the world think about food and women shape our lives? You'd be surprised at how your relationship with food that has so much to do not about you, but what the world tells you that how the world shapes what your relationship should be with food will be. It's a class of discovery, and I'm not surprised that a lot of students are excited about being in that class.
That's really cool, Phil. All right, so this question has come in, and you could probably talk about this for a very long time. So Say what you will. So the question is, what barriers do you see in the physical design of spaces that create further barriers for quality in regards to intersectional feminism?
Very good. I'll start first of all with gender, and then I will move in intersectional feminism. I'll answer this very quickly. If you look into offices and you look into homes, you will notice something very, very different. At home, the way the home is organized seems to be a little bit more relaxed, and everybody seems to know, have a place that, you can just, get a list, some kind of chair you put in your room. My daughter, for instance, my two daughters are in their 20s. When I go into their room, I see some of the things they put in their rooms, where they sit, where they put their pillow, the kind of things they put there, even some of the posters. Some of them are really funny to me, like a little bit wacky. But the thing is, this is their space. Compare that to offices. A lot of the time, offices are places that a lot of people who are female find a little bit uncomfortable. Why? Because it was designed, most architects are men. It was designed by and for men. So don't be surprised that sometimes you walk into places and you don't feel very comfortable about them. They are not made for you. This is also how somebody may feel. I may walk into a place and feel, it's not just because of being female, but also as a Black person, this doesn't quite fit me. And one last example I will give you is this. Do you notice that most offices, in many cases, women complain about feeling too cold and men complain of being too warm on the average? It's really because the hidden systems in those places are designed by and for men. So definitely those spaces have implications for gender, but also in intersections in terms of how do I feel comfortable, not simply as a woman, but how do I feel comfortable as an African, as a female, as a Black person, as somebody who is, as a Christian, as someone who speaks English. All of these things affect who you are, and it affects the space you find yourself in. Space is not something to be taken for granted because they are designed. They are never designed for everybody. They are usually designed for a particular group of people. And if you don't fit into that people, when you come there, you will find some disadvantages that will make you uncomfortable, or elements of it that you will keep saying, I don't quite feel myself here. It's because it wasn't made for you in the first place. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I do hope that I've given a little bit of showing to this question.
Well, I think that's a wonderful answer. It makes me think that, again, it's just one of those things that the Faculty of Arts is so diverse, and it just goes to show that regardless of whether or not you want women's and gender studies to be your major, or it would be beneficial for every single person to take a course from women and gender studies. Can you talk a little bit about if there are any senior level women's and gender studies courses that do not have prerequisites?
We do have what we call some of the, basically our course is really, when we say that the course has prerequisite, most of the 300-400 level courses do have prerequisites. But if you are interested in them, you can register and then ask the professor to assess you. So even if they have prerequisites, the professor can look at what you have done before. And in many cases, they will admit you into the class. When students, for instance, when I teach a course on gender and development in Africa, or I teach a course on something on the violence against women, I have students who will come to me and say, I want to take this course, but I've never taken a course in women and gender studies. I sit down with them, I talk to them. I want to know, first of all, what is their level academically? Where are they? Is this something that they can do? As we do that assessment, it is the professor who is teaching the class that will do that assessment. When you go to register, it might say prerequisites needed, but it still allows you to register. Then you talk to the professor, and we do as much as possible to have a thorough assessment, and we keep track of those students. So you might come into some of my classes and actually have first-year students up to fourth-year students. If I feel, sometimes a student will register, or maybe 2-3 weeks into the class, they feel this is not quite where I want to be, and they will, they will decide to withdraw. In many cases, I have found students are able to move on when we do that thorough assessment and we admit them into the class. And we have exciting courses at that level. We do have law and feminism in Canada. We have feminism and sexual assault. We have body politics. another incredibly exciting course. We have religion, spirituality, and social justice. And we have a class, masculinities. People have this impression that when you come to women's and gender studies, you only talk about women. That's not true. Actually, in both my research and using myself as an example, I research immigrants, for instance. I research African immigrants, and I research both men, women, trans, every one of them. Because when I talk about, for instance, violence against women, you want to hear from all perspectives. You don't want to hear, we want to hear women's voices because they are the ones who are the survivors. But you also want to hear the voice of women because violence against women is an open-ended statement. Violence against women by who? By men. So you want to hear from various perspectives if you really want to critically explore that question. So when we look at if you look at the course like masculinities, in every one of our courses, we look at gender in terms of intersectionalities of race, class, LGBTQ, all of that, come into our classes, maybe not every class, but across our classes, we really try to reflect the world as it is. I encourage students, take a course in women and gender studies. Open your eyes. Even if you're, whichever department you're in, please situate yourself in this world that you find yourself. Go with very critical lenses where you are going. Our students who have ended up in law, in medicine, etc., they write back to tell us that, having this background opened my eyes about the world and makes me see things that my colleagues around me do not see. And most importantly, it gave me a consciousness for social justice everywhere I am to make a difference. That is really why I encourage students, whether you are coming to study women and gender studies or not, take a course. If you have never taken any course before, start with Women and Gender Studies, WGS 101 and 102. Those are entry-level courses that you can actually study, get into, that will shape your knowledge, and then you can decide which other ones to go into. And the wonderful thing about classes are, our department, we're fairly small. Our faculty, we collaborate with people across the campus so that you can be in our department and have access to many other professors. Sometimes we may not even really want to supervise you. It will be those who are affiliated to women and gender studies. So you have a huge community of feminists at your service, at your disposal, that you can always go to, even for advice.
Wonderful. All right, Philomena, we are basically at our time. So are there, if you have any sort of closing words, otherwise, thank you to everybody for tuning in this morning. You guys are the early birds, up and at 'em. This was our first live Zoom session of arts orientation. So thank you very much for tuning in. Phil, did you have any closing words?
I just want to say thank you very much. You chose well by coming into the University of Alberta, and I wish you all the best. We will all be here and we'll be waiting for you. We'll do our very best. COVID-19 or no COVID-19, we will make this year your best in life. Welcome to the U of A.
Yes, welcome everybody. Thank you very much. And please do check out any of the other panels today or for the rest of the week. Thank you. Bye.